COVID-19 lockdowns and restrictions have been tough on sectors across the country since Delta first hit our shores, especially on our police force. President of the Police Association Chris Cahill joins me now on the topic. Chris, first of all, how would you rate the morale right now in the police force?
Good afternoon. Oh, look, things are pretty stressed. There's been a lot of staff having to work at the checkpoints and MIQs. Most of those are pretty long hours, quite a bit of overtime, and not great work to have to do overall. And even staff that have had to travel around the country to do it leaves gaps elsewhere. So there's a lot of stress out there at the moment.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, she announced a bit more on the Auckland border, that lifting on December 15, but people still requiring that vaccine passport or negative test to be able to move around the country. And police are required to enforce this. Was that a feasible request, do you think?
We'll have to look at exactly how the detail will work, but it's certainly a better option than having checkpoints and having to check every vehicle at a checkpoint. So there's about 300 staff assigned to those checkpoints. So if they can be stood down, the majority get back to normal duties, and then just with some extra patrols to do those random checks. I think that's viable. I mean, you're bearing in mind 90% of Aucklanders, if not more, will be vaccinated by then. So the majority of people leaving Auckland will meet the criteria.
I know it's still sort of quite early to look at how that will work, but I'm assuming there might need to be a law change in that and allowing cops to do these spot checks.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, police have to have legal grounds to stop a vehicle, and currently that's under the Land Transport Act, and obviously that will have to be amended to give police powers to stop to check for vaccine or testing, and that presumably will happen.
Would you say that there is a bit of a feeling that within the police force right now that they feel a bit overworked? I mean, it's been about 3 months now that this border's been up. I can't imagine it's been easy to man that the whole time, and you mentioned police officers being flown in to cover as well. Would you feel like that is a fair statement to say they are feeling overworked?
Yeah, they're certainly feeling pretty stretched. I mean, you've got the MIQs, that's another 300 odd staff in them. But it's also, as the public started to get, shall we say, less inclined to just agree with all these restrictions, police have had to be at the forefront of that as well. And then now there's the added risk of actually dealing with someone who's got COVID, bearing how many cases in the community. And it's all adding up to some frustration. And obviously, at the same time, we've got a pay round negotiation that's completely stalled with a lack of a decent offer from police. All adds up to create some pretty unhappy members.
How would you rate the communication then as well between the government and the police around the decisions that have sort of occurred over the last couple months?
Yeah, probably wouldn't get a pass mark from me, to be honest. I think there's been a fair bit of confusion from what the government's been saying. I'm not sure the practicalities from a policing point of view have always been considered. And clearly we're still a bit confused why we weren't prioritised for the vaccination in the first place. And we still don't really know where we sit in relation to mandates, because police are actually captured by some of the other government mandates, and that creates a bit of confusion as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the mandates, because we're all waiting to find out what's going to happen there. We've got clear indications on the education and health sectors, but not the police. So have you had a look actually though at how many police may have to be stood down or lose their job if they choose not to get vaccinated if a mandate does come in place?
Well, currently police vaccination rates sit at about that 90%. So that's still a significant portion who either aren't vaccinated or who haven't advised police they're vaccinated. And they can be two different things. We would think if a mandate comes in that would narrow, but it's still something we'd have to work through and see. And from our position, it's got to be a legal mandate. This isn't to us. It's not our position to make a medical or a moral decision. Our position is to support the legal stance. And that's what we'll be looking at going forward, and certainly supporting any officers, no matter what their decision are, just to make sure that the legal process is followed for everyone.
And just finally, I mean, how do you see the next couple months playing out as we do move back to some sort of normality? Do you see things becoming maybe more positive over time, particularly in the police force?
Well, I do. I think the shutting down of the checkpoints is going to make a big difference to those officers that have been working on those and their colleagues who has been stretched trying to fill the gaps. I think hopefully with the reducing of the length of time in MIQs, that will start to reduce the number of officers required in those as well, and things will get back to some normality. But course, then we have the Christmas New Year rush, which is always a busy time for policing. So I'm not sure there's too much of a break coming the way of police officers.
Well, hoping for the best. Thanks so much for your time, Chris. That's President of the Police Association, Chris Cahill. For more stories, head to nzherald.co.nz. I'm Sherry Kinnear for New Zealand Herald Focus.